The silence in the nursery was louder than any scream I was holding back. My name is Lillian, and just 6 weeks ago, holding my newborn daughter Leah was the purest joy I'd ever known. Her tiny fingers wrapped around mine, her milky breath on my cheek. I thought my heart would burst with love. Aidan, my husband, had tears in his eyes when she was born. We were supposed to be happy. We were supposed to be a family. Now, a thick, grey fog seemed to have rolled into my life, muffling all the joy. It started subtly, a creeping exhaustion that sleep couldn't fix, a worry that gnawed at the edges of my thoughts. Then it became a monster, whispering terrible things in the quiet moments. What if I drop her? What if I'm not good enough? What if I hurt her by mistake? The thoughts were like shards of glass in my brain. I loved Leah so fiercely it terrified me. "You're just tired, Lil," Aidan would say, his smile a little too bright, a little too forced. It's normal. All new moms feel overwhelmed. His mother, Marin, moved in the week after Leah was born, supposedly to help. Her help felt more like a constant, suffocating audit of my every move. "Oh, Lillian, dear, are you sure you should be holding her like that?" she'd coo, already reaching for Leah. My Aidan always liked to be held more securely. Or, is she crying again? Perhaps she's not getting enough from you. When Aidan was a baby, I always had an ample supply. Her eyes would flick down to my chest, then back to my face with a look I couldn't quite decipher, but it made my skin crawl. Every suggestion, every helpful comment chipped away at the fragile confidence I was trying to build. I'd find myself standing over Leah's crib, heart pounding, convinced I was doing everything wrong. The simple act of changing a diaper became a monumental task, my hands shaking. Marin would often materialise beside me. "Here, let me. You look like you're about to fall apart, dear." Aidan started spending more time at work or decompressing with friends. "Marin's got things covered here, right?" he'd say, already halfway out the door. "You girls just bond." But I wasn't bonding. I was drifting, lost in a sea of anxiety and self-doubt. Marin's presence became a constant reminder of my perceived failures. She'd hum happily while rocking Leah, a perfect picture of maternal bliss, while I sat on the sofa, feeling like an empty shell. "You know, Lillian," Marin said one afternoon, her voice syrupy sweet as she bounced Leah on her knee, "Aidan was telling me about your grandmother's trust. Such a wonderful thing she did for you and the baby. You must be so relieved to have that security, especially now when you're not quite yourself." I just nodded, the fog in my head too thick to process her words properly. The trust my grandmother Annabelle had left for me, and for any children I might have, was substantial. It was meant to be a safety net, a gift of love. Now, even the thought of it felt heavy. My friends called, their voices bright and cheerful. "How's motherhood? Isn't it just the best?" I'd mumble something non-committal, unable to voice the darkness that was swallowing me. How could I explain that sometimes I felt nothing but a terrifying void where joy should be? They'd think I was a monster. Maybe I was. Last night I couldn't sleep. The intrusive thoughts were particularly loud. Leah was asleep in her bassinet beside our bed, a tiny, perfect angel. Aidan was snoring softly beside me. I slipped out of bed, desperate for some reassurance. Anything to make the horrible feelings stop. I tiptoed into the living room, my laptop in hand, planning to search for postpartum depression symptoms, to see if what I was experiencing had a name, if it was treatable. The house was quiet except for the low hum of the refrigerator. I sat on the sofa, the laptop screen illuminating my tear-streaked face. As I typed, "feeling like a bad mother," into the search bar, I heard a floorboard creak in the hallway, followed by Marin's hushed voice from the kitchen. She must have gotten up for water. I paused, not wanting her to find me like this. Her voice was low, conspiratorial. "Yes, he's asleep. She's been erratic all day. Crying spells, then just staring into space." A pause. "Don't worry, Aidan. Dr. Fuller said these things take time to document properly." Another pause. Then her voice dropped even lower, laced with something that sounded chillingly like triumph. "It's working. Just a little longer, and everyone will see she's not fit. The trust fund is as good as ours." The laptop slipped from my numb fingers, clattering onto the rug. The trust fund is as good as ours. The words echoed in the suffocating silence of the living room, sharp and cold, slicing through the fog in my head. My breath hitched. It couldn't be. I must have misheard. My mind, already a tangled mess of anxiety, was surely playing tricks on me. I stumbled back to the bedroom, my heart hammering against my ribs. Aidan was still asleep, oblivious. I slid under the covers, shivering despite the warmth of the room. Sleep was impossible. Marin's words, her tone, replayed over and over. Everyone will see she's not fit. The next morning, the world felt tilted, unreal. Marin was in the kitchen, humming as she made coffee, Leah gurgling contentedly in her arms. The picture of domestic bliss was obscene. "Morning, dear," Marin chirped, her smile unwavering. "Sleep well?" I couldn't meet her eyes. "Fine," I mumbled, my voice hoarse. When Aidan came downstairs, I waited until Marin took Leah into the nursery to change her. "Aidan," I began, my voice trembling. "Last night I heard Marin on the phone. She was talking to you." He looked up from his toast, a flicker of something. Surprise? Annoyance? In his eyes before his expression smoothed into one of concern. "Oh? What about, Lil? Was everything okay?" She said you were talking about Dr. Fuller, and about me not being fit, and about the trust fund. The words felt like poison on my tongue. Aidan put down his coffee cup slowly. He walked over to me, taking my hands. His were warm, steady. "Lillian, honey," he said, his voice gentle, patient. "You know you haven't been yourself lately. The PPD, it can make you imagine things, make you paranoid. You were probably half asleep, dreaming." "No, I wasn't dreaming." I pulled my hands away. I heard her, Aidan. She said it was working, and that the trust fund was as good as ours. He sighed, a look of deep hurt spreading across his face. "Lil, that's a terrible thing to accuse my mother of. To accuse me of. Do you really think we'd do something like that? We're worried about you, that's all. Dr. Fuller is someone Mom knows, a psychiatrist. We thought it might be good for you to talk to someone, given how much you're struggling." Tears welled in my eyes. Was he right? Was my mind so broken that I was inventing these monstrous plots? The PPD made everything feel distorted. "But she sounded so gleeful," I whispered, desperate for him to understand, to deny it in a way I could believe. Marin re-entered the kitchen just then, her smile faltering as she took in the scene. "Is everything all right, dears?" Aidan ran a hand through his hair. "Lillian had a bit of a scare last night, Mom. She thinks she overheard you saying some upsetting things." Marin's face crumpled into an expression of profound concern. She rushed to my side, taking my arm. "Oh, my poor girl. What did you think you heard? You know, this deep depression can cause such vivid delusions. Aidan and I were just discussing how worried we are, how much we want to help you get better." "The trust fund?" "We were only saying how fortunate it is that you and Leah have that security, especially now." Her hand on my arm felt like a vice. Her words, so reasonable, so caring, made me feel even crazier. They were a united front of placid concern, and I was the hysterical, delusional one. I mumbled an apology, shame washing over me. I'm sorry, I'm just so tired, my head's all mixed up." "Of course it is, dear," Marin cooed, patting my arm. "You just need rest. And perhaps a chat with Dr. Fuller wouldn't be such a bad idea, for your own peace of mind." I retreated, the fog thicker than ever, my own sanity feeling like sand slipping through my fingers. But beneath the confusion, a tiny, cold spark of suspicion remained. It was small, almost imperceptible, but it was there. Over the next few days, I tried to push Marin's words away, to believe Aidan, but I started noticing things. Husbands and wives have patterns, little routines. Aidan's were changing. He'd end phone calls abruptly if I walked into the room. He started asking casual questions about Grandmother Annabelle's trust. "Just curious, Lil, who's the executor? Do you have copies of all the paperwork?" Claiming he wanted to help manage things, given my state. "You've got enough on your plate with Leah and everything else," he'd said, his eyes avoiding mine. One afternoon, while Aidan was supposedly at the hardware store and Marin was napping, I was looking for a spare charging cable in his bedside drawer. My hand brushed against something unfamiliar. Tucked beneath a pile of socks was a sleek, new burner phone. My blood ran cold. Why would Aidan need a secret phone? With trembling fingers, I turned it on. There was only one number in the recent calls list. My heart stopped. It was logged under a single entry. Dr. Alfred Fuller, Psychiatry. The burner phone felt like a live grenade in my hand. Dr. Alfred Fuller, Psychiatry. Not just a casual recommendation from Maren, but a secret contact on a hidden phone. The tiny spark of suspicion ignited, burning away a patch of the suffocating fog. They weren't just worried, they were plotting. A wave of nausea hit me, followed by an icy rage I hadn't felt in months. It wasn't just about me anymore. It was about Leah, my beautiful, innocent daughter, who they wanted to use as a pawn to get their hands on money. A primal, ferocious protectiveness surged through me, so strong it almost choked me. They thought the PPD had made me weak, a broken toy they could easily discard. They had no idea. The next day, while Maren was helpfully taking Leah for a walk, "You need some quiet time, dear. You look so stressed," I slipped out. I went to an electronics store across town, my heart pounding with a mixture of fear and grim determination. I bought the smallest, highest quality, voice-activated recorder I could find. It was expensive, but it was an investment in my daughter's future, and my own. My mission began. I became a ghost in my own home, a silent observer. The PPD still clung to me, a heavy cloak of sadness and anxiety, but now there was a purpose beneath it. I had to fight, not just the darkness in my mind, but the very real monsters in my house. I started placing the recorder in strategic locations. Under the sofa in the living room when I knew Aidan and Maren would be talking, tucked behind a plant in the kitchen, sometimes even in the diaper bag if Maren was taking Leah out and Aidan was home. I'd retrieve it when they were occupied, my hands shaking as I transferred the audio files to a secure folder on my laptop, which I now kept password protected and hidden. The recordings were horrifying. "She's definitely getting worse," Maren's voice, crisp and satisfied. "Did you see how she just stared at the wall for 10 minutes this morning?" Aidan's reply, weary but complicit. "Dr. Fuller said we need more specific examples. Things that sound genuinely alarming. We need to make sure everyone sees it." "Don't worry, son," Maren soothed. "I'll make sure of it. We just need to keep emphasizing her fragility, her inability to cope." They discussed exaggerating my symptoms, twisting my words, coaching each other on what to say to family and friends who called. They talked about their meetings with Dr. Fuller, how he was advising them on the best way to present the case for incompetence. Each recording was another nail in their coffin, another piece of evidence. I also started a secret journal, a simple notebook hidden under my mattress, meticulously noting dates, times, specific incidents, and cross-referencing them with the recordings. Who said what, when, where, every detail, no matter how small. One evening, I called my younger sister Jade. We hadn't been close for a few years, a stupid argument creating a rift that neither of us had bothered to mend. But she was family. Maybe she would believe me. "Jade, it's Lillian." "Lil? Wow, hi, everything okay? Maren called a few days ago, said you were having a really rough time with the baby." Her voice was hesitant, laced with a skepticism that stung. "Jade, I need to talk to you. It's about Aidan and Maren." I tried to explain, to tell her what I suspected, what I'd heard. "Lillian," she interrupted, her tone shifting from hesitant to concerned in a way that mirrored Maren's. "Are you sure you're all right? Maren said you've been a bit paranoid. Maybe you should talk to that doctor she mentioned. It sounds like you're under a lot of stress." My heart sank. Maren had already gotten to her, poisoning the well. "Jade, please, you have to listen to me." "I think you need to rest, Lil," she said gently but firmly. "Call me when you're feeling more yourself, okay?" The line went dead. I was truly alone in this. The isolation was crushing, but it also hardened my resolve. If no one would believe me, I'd make them see. I'd gather so much proof they'd have no choice. A few days later, I was reviewing the latest recording. Maren was speaking to Aidan, her voice low and urgent. "Lucille Fowler is coming over for tea tomorrow afternoon. I've been telling her how concerned we are about Lillian's episodes. Aidan, I need you to be here. And just before Lucille arrives, I want you to try and, well, say something that might upset her. We need Lucille to witness one of her outbursts. It'll be much more convincing if she sees it for herself. My blood ran cold. They were planning to provoke me, to stage a breakdown in front of a family friend Maren had been grooming. The recorder in my hand felt like my only weapon. The next afternoon, the air in the living room was thick with forced pleasantries. Lucille Fowler, a woman I'd known vaguely for years through Maren, sat perched on the edge of the armchair, her eyes darting towards me with a mixture of pity and apprehension. Maren was pouring tea, her movements graceful, her expression one of saintly concern. Aidan hovered nearby, looking suitably grave. "Lillian, dear, are you feeling a bit better today?" Maren asked, her voice dripping with false sweetness. I forced a weak smile. "Yes, thank you, Maren." Inside, I was a coiled spring of fury and anxiety. I knew what was coming. Just as Maren had coached him, Aidan chose his moment. As Lucille was mid-sentence describing her prize-winning roses, Aidan turned to me, his voice loud enough for Lucille to hear clearly. "Lillian, did you remember to call the paediatrician about Leah's rash? You know, the one you were so frantic about yesterday. Or did that slip your mind too?" His tone was accusatory, condescending. It was a deliberate jab, designed to make me look incompetent, forgetful. The rash was a tiny milk spot, Maren had pointed out, which I'd already dabbed with cream. I felt the heat rise in my cheeks. "I took care of it, Aidan," I said, my voice tight. "Oh, good," he said, with an exaggerated sigh of relief. "One less thing for us to worry about, eh, Maren?" He winked at his mother. Maren patted my hand. "He's just worried, dear. We all are." She gave Lucille a significant look. Lucille nodded slowly, her gaze lingering on me. I could see the judgment forming in her eyes. I wanted to scream, to expose them right then and there, but I held my tongue, clinging to the image of the recorder silently capturing their charade. I excused myself, claiming Leah needed me, and escaped upstairs, my heart pounding. Later that night, after Maren and Aidan were asleep, I listened to the recording of Lucille's visit, and then to other files I hadn't yet had a chance to review thoroughly. And then I heard it. A conversation between Aidan and Maren from a few days prior, one I'd only skimmed. Aidan's voice was tight with a desperation I hadn't heard before. "I don't know what else to do, Mom," Vinny called again. "He's not going to wait much longer. If I don't get him that 20 grand by the end of the month..." His voice trailed off, but the fear was palpable. "Aidan, we've been over this," Maren said, her tone sharp. "The trust is the only way. Once Lillian is out of the picture, legally speaking, we'll have access. You'll be able to pay Vinny and whoever else you owe. Just stick to the plan. Dr. Fuller is confident. Gambling debts, $20,000. It wasn't just about greed then. Aidan was cornered. This wasn't opportunistic. It was a desperate, calculated move to save his own skin. The revelation didn't lessen his betrayal. It amplified it. He was willing to destroy me, to steal our daughter's inheritance, to pay off a bookie named Vinny. The next morning, armed with this new, sickening knowledge, I made a call. I found a lawyer online, Ms. Stacey Chapman, specialising in family law and custody battles. Her website projected strength and competence. I booked a consultation, my voice surprisingly steady. A few days later, I sat in Ms. Chapman's office, a sleek, modern space that felt worlds away from the oppressive atmosphere of my home. I laid it all out. The PPD, Maren's suffocating presence, Aidan's gaslighting, the overheard conversations, the burner phone, Dr. Fuller, and finally the gambling debts. I played her a few of the most damning recordings. Ms. Chapman, a woman in her 40s with sharp, intelligent eyes, listened intently, her expression growing more serious with each revelation. When I finished, she leaned back in her chair, silent for a long moment. "Mrs. Jenkins, Lillian," she said finally, her voice firm but kind. "What you've described, what I've heard, it's unconscionable, and frankly, it's criminal. You've done incredibly well to gather this evidence under such duress." Relief washed over me, so potent it almost made me weep. Someone believed me. "I'll take your case," Ms. Chapman stated. "We need to continue gathering evidence, every conversation, every incident. Document everything. They're building a case against you. We need to build an irrefutable one against them." I left her office feeling a sliver of hope for the first time in months. The fight was far from over, but now I wasn't alone. That evening, Aidan seemed more agitated than usual. He paced the living room while I fed Leah. Maren watched him, a frown etching her features. "She's too quiet," Aidan muttered, gesturing towards me. "It's like she's given up. It's unsettling." Maren nodded slowly. "Perhaps. Or perhaps she's just sinking deeper. Either way, you're right. We need to accelerate things with Dr. Fuller. It's time to push for a formal competency hearing. The sooner this is settled, the better." My blood ran cold. They were misinterpreting my quiet resilience, my focused evidence gathering as a sign of surrender, and they were about to escalate their attack. The official-looking envelope arrived a week later. My hands trembled as I tore it open. Court summons. Petition for a competency hearing and temporary guardianship of Leah Jenkins, filed by Aidan Jenkins and Maren Jenkins. The words swam before my eyes. They were actually doing it, citing my dangerous mental state and inability to care for a minor child. Attached was a preliminary report from Dr. Alfred Fuller, filled with clinical jargon and twisted interpretations of my PPD symptoms, painting me as a paranoid, delusional wreck on the verge of a complete breakdown. The reality of potentially losing Leah, of having her ripped from my arms by these two vipers, hit me with the force of a physical blow. The fog I'd been fighting so hard to keep at bay threatened to engulf me completely. My anxiety spiked, the intrusive thoughts returning with a vengeance. For a few terrifying days, I could barely function. Holding Leah was the only thing that anchored me, her warm little body a shield against the encroaching darkness. Maren, sensing my distress, ramped up her campaign. She was constantly on the phone, her voice dripping with sorrow as she recounted my latest episodes to anyone who would listen. She just stares blankly for hours, you know. And the things she says, so disconnected from reality. We're terribly worried about Leah's safety. She even called Jade again. My sister, to her credit, sounded less convinced this time. Maren called. "Lil!" Jade told me when I managed to get her on the phone, away from Maren's prying ears. She was very dramatic. "Said you accused her of trying to poison your food now." "I never said that, Jade," I cried, horrified. "She's twisting everything. She's lying." I know, Jade said. And for the first time, I heard a note of doubt in her voice about Maren, not me. "Actually, I saw you with Leah at the park last week, just for a minute. You looked tired, but you looked like a mum. Not like the raving lunatic Maren describes." A small seed of hope sprouted. Maybe Jade was starting to see. Ms. Chapman was a rock. "This is their move, Lillian," she said during an urgent phone call. "It's aggressive, but we anticipated it. The report from Dr. Fuller is biased and based on hearsay provided by Aidan and Maren. We fight it with facts, with your recordings. Don't let them break you. Focus on Leah. Focus on the truth." Her words helped. I clung to them like a lifeline. The upcoming hearing loomed, a terrifying precipice. I continued to record, to document, driven by a desperate, primal need to protect my daughter. Every hushed conversation, every manipulative tactic went into my evidence folder. One evening, Maren was in the kitchen, on the phone with Dr. Fuller. Her voice was low, but I'd become adept at anticipating these calls. I'd left a tiny recorder tucked into the fruit bowl on the counter earlier that day. She was discussing strategy for the hearing, her tone confident, almost gleeful. "Yes, doctor. Aidan will emphasise the incident with the dropped bottle. And I'll testify about her increasing paranoia, her refusal to let anyone else care for Leah for more than a few minutes. It all paints a very clear picture." After she hung up, she left her phone carelessly on the counter while she went to the bathroom. My heart leaped into my throat. This was a risk, a huge one, but I had to see. I darted into the kitchen, snatched her phone, and quickly scrolled through her recent texts. There it was, a short exchange with Dr. Fuller. Maren. "He's preparing the final affidavit. Very strong. You'll be pleased." Dr. Fuller. "Excellent. The preliminary hearing is just a formality. With your testimony and Aidan's, custody should be straightforward." My fingers fumbled as I tried to take a picture of the screen with my own phone. Just as I snapped the photo, I heard the toilet flush. Maren was coming back. I shoved her phone back onto the counter, spinning around, trying to look casual just as she walked in. "Lillian, what are you doing in here?" Her eyes narrowed, suspicion flickering. "Just getting a glass of water," I stammered, my heart hammering. My hand, holding my own phone, was hidden behind my back. She stared at me for a long moment, then shrugged. "Well, try not to wander around in the dark. You might fall." I escaped, my breath catching in my throat. That was too close, far too close. But I had it. Another piece of the puzzle, another link in their chain of deceit. The text message was damning. The text message from Marin's phone burned a hole in my digital pocket. It wasn't just Dr. Fuller's complicity. It was his chilling confidence. Ms. Chapman had been digging into Dr. Fuller's background, and a few days after my close call with Marin's phone, she called with a bombshell. "Lillian, we've found something significant about Dr. Fuller." Ms. Chapman's voice was grim. "He's not just some random psychiatrist Marin found. He was a medical school colleague of Marin's late husband, Aidan's father. And more importantly, public records show Marin bailed him out of a serious financial mess about 10 years ago. A failed private clinic, significant debts. He owes her. Big time." It clicked into place. This wasn't just professional misconduct. It was a deeply personal debt being repaid. Dr. Fuller wasn't just helping a concerned mother. He was beholden to Marin, willing to risk his entire career to settle an old score, or more likely, to avoid whatever leverage she still held over him. The conspiracy was deeper, darker, and more rotten than I could have imagined. Aidan and Marin must have sensed my quiet determination, my refusal to crumble completely. Or perhaps Ms. Chapman's initial responses to their court filings had them spooked. Whatever the reason, they escalated their tactics, resorting to a level of cruelty that still makes me sick to my stomach. It happened on a Tuesday morning. Marin had offered to watch Leah for an hour so I could take a bath. "You look exhausted, dear. A nice long soak will do you wonders." Her solicitude was, as always, cloying and false. I was wary, but the idea of a few moments alone, submerged in hot water, was too tempting. I had also by now taken to placing a small, motion-activated baby monitor with video and audio recording capabilities in Leah's room, another layer of protection. I drew the bath, my ears straining for any unusual sounds. Leah was napping in her crib. Marin was supposedly tidying the kitchen. After about 20 minutes, just as I was starting to relax, I heard a strange thud from downstairs, followed by Marin's theatrical gasp. "Oh my goodness, Lillian! Lillian!" I scrambled out of the tub, grabbing a towel, my heart instantly pounding. I raced downstairs, dripping water, to find a scene straight out of a horror film. Leah's bouncer seat, which had been safely tucked in the corner of the living room, was now at the very top of the basement stairs, teetering precariously. Marin stood at the bottom of the main staircase, hand to her mouth, eyes wide with feigned shock. Aidan was suddenly there too, appearing from the kitchen, his face a mask of alarm. "What happened?" I shrieked, rushing towards the basement door. I don't know," Marin stammered. "I just came out of the kitchen and saw it. She must have. You must have left her there, Lillian. Oh, thank God, she didn't fall." Aidan grabbed my arm. "Lillian, how could you, leaving her like that, right by the stairs?" His voice was a low growl of accusation. "I didn't! I would never!" I cried, looking wildly from the bouncer to their faces. Leah was still asleep in her crib upstairs. I'd checked before my bath. This was a setup. A monstrous, cold-blooded setup. Before I could even process the full extent of their depravity, the doorbell rang. Two stern-faced women in official-looking attire stood on the doorstep. "Child Protective Services," one of them announced. "We received an anonymous call about an infant left in a dangerous situation. Terror, cold and absolute, seized me. They had staged this, then called CPS on me. They were trying to manufacture irrefutable proof of my negligence right before the hearing. For 2 agonizing hours, the CPS workers interviewed me, inspected the house, and spoke with Aidan and Marin, who played their roles as concerned, horrified family members to perfection. I was numb, barely able to speak, the world tilting crazily around me. This was it. This was how I lost her. Then, a lifeline. As the CPS workers were preparing their notes, I remembered the baby monitor. "Wait," I said, my voice hoarse. There's a camera in Leah's room. It records. Hope flickered. I prayed it had caught something, anything. We all trooped upstairs. I fumbled with the app on my phone, my hands shaking so badly I could barely type my password, and there it was. The motion activation had caught Maren. Clear as day, the footage showed her tiptoeing into the living room while I was in the bath, picking up the empty bouncer seat, carrying it to the top of the basement stairs and carefully positioning it. Then she'd walk back towards the kitchen, out of frame, presumably to discover it. The CPS workers watched the footage, their expressions hardening. They exchanged a look. "Mrs. Jenkins," one of them said to Maren, her voice devoid of warmth, "would you care to explain this?" Maren turned white. Aidan stared, speechless. The investigation was closed almost immediately, with apologies for the distress caused. But the terror of those few hours, the visceral fear of having Leah taken from me due to their lies, almost broke me. It was their most vicious attack yet, a desperate gamble to secure their victory. The court date was set for the following week. Ms. Chapman was furious when I told her about the CPS incident and showed her the baby monitor footage. "This is good, Lillian. Horrific, but good for our case. It shows their desperation, their willingness to commit fraud." She paused. "We have a strong case with the recordings, the financial motive, Dr. Fuller's connection to Maren, and now this. But," she added, her voice sobering, "court is unpredictable. And Maren and Aidan, they seem unnervingly confident. We need to be prepared for anything." The courtroom was cold, sterile, and suffocatingly quiet. I sat beside Ms. Chapman, my hands clenched so tightly in my lap my knuckles were white. Across the aisle, Aidan and Maren sat with their lawyer, looking the picture of concerned, aggrieved relatives. Maren dabbed at her eyes with a lace handkerchief. Aidan stared straight ahead, his jaw set in an expression of solemn responsibility. Dr. Fuller sat behind them, looking professional and grave. The hypocrisy was nauseating. Their lawyer began, painting a grim picture of my supposed mental decline. He called Aidan to the stand first. Aidan recounted, his voice thick with feigned emotion, instances of my erratic behaviour, my deepening paranoia, my inability to cope with the basic demands of motherhood. He spoke of my delusional accusations against him and his mother. Each lie was a fresh stab to my heart, but I met his gaze, letting him see the cold fury in my eyes. He faltered, just for a second, before looking away. Then Maren took the stand. Oh, Maren was a performer. Tears streamed down her face as she described her heartbreak at watching me deteriorate. She recounted fabricated incidents of me forgetting Leah, of wild mood swings, of nonsensical ramblings. "All we want is for Lillian to get help," she sobbed, "and for Leah to be safe." The judge, a woman with a stern but unreadable expression, listened impassively, occasionally making notes. Finally, Dr. Fuller testified. He spoke with calm authority, using medical terms that made my PPD sound like a raging psychosis. He referenced his thorough assessment, his grave concerns for my stability and for Leah's welfare if left in my care. He recommended immediate intervention and temporary guardianship for Aidan and Maren. He was smooth, convincing, and utterly despicable. I felt a knot of dread tighten in my stomach. They were so plausible, so polished in their deceit. Then it was Ms. Chapman's turn. She stood, calm and composed, a stark contrast to the melodrama that had just unfolded. "Your Honour," she began, "we will demonstrate that this petition is not born of concern, but of a calculated malicious conspiracy to defraud my client and seize control of her child and her inheritance." A murmur went through the small public gallery. Aidan and Maren exchanged a nervous glance. Ms. Chapman started with Dr. Fuller. "Dr. Fuller, you testified that your assessment was based on direct observation and information provided by Mr. and Mrs. Jenkins. Is that correct?" "Yes, that is correct." "And you stand by your professional opinion that my client is unfit?" "Regrettably, yes." Ms. Chapman then presented the evidence of Maren's financial bailout of Dr. Fuller years ago. "Doctor, isn't it true that Maren Jenkins provided you with a significant sum of money when your private clinic failed, effectively saving you from financial ruin?" Dr. Fuller paled. He stammered, "That was a personal matter, unrelated." "Unrelated," Ms. Chapman pressed. Or did it perhaps create a debt, a sense of obligation? His composure began to crack. He avoided the judge's gaze. Then came the recordings. Ms. Chapman set up a small speaker. Your Honour, I would like to play a series of audio recordings, lawfully obtained by my client in her own home. The first recording crackled to life. Marin's voice, coaching Aidan. Say something that might upset her. We need Lucille to witness one of her outbursts. Aidan flinched as if struck. Marin's eyes widened in disbelief. Ms. Chapman played another, Aidan and Marin discussing the trust fund. Just a little longer, and everyone will see she's not fit. The trust fund is as good as ours, Marin gasped audibly. Her lawyer shot to his feet. Objection, Your Honour. This is inadmissible. On what grounds, counsellor? The judge asked, her voice sharp. The recordings were made in the petitioner's own home, where she has a reasonable expectation of privacy to record conversations she is party to or can overhear. Overruled. Proceed, Ms. Chapman. One by one, the damning clips played. Their plotting, their admissions of fabricating incidents, their discussions about manipulating Dr. Fuller, Marin's gloating, Aidan's desperate talk of his gambling debts to Vinnie. The courtroom was silent, save for their recorded voices weaving a tapestry of their treachery. Aidan's confident smirk had long since vanished, replaced by a sickly green pallor. He stared blankly ahead, defeated. Marin began to tremble, her face contorting in a mask of rage and panic. Dr. Fuller looked like he was about to be physically ill. Miss Chapman then presented the baby monitor footage of Marin staging the scene with the bouncer seat at the top of the stairs, followed by the CPS report clearing me. She presented the text messages between Marin and Dr. Fuller. When the last piece of evidence had been presented, a heavy silence filled the room. The judge looked from the evidence to Aidan, then to Marin, then to Dr. Fuller. Her expression was no longer unreadable. It was thunderous. Marin finally snapped. She's lying! She's crazy! She faked all of it! She shrieked, lunging forward before her lawyer restrained her. Aidan just sat there, a hollow shell. The judge banged her gavel. Order! Mrs. Jenkins, control yourself, or I will have you removed. Her gaze, like chips of ice, settled on Marin, then Aidan, then Dr. Fuller. I have heard the testimony and reviewed the evidence presented by both sides. She paused, letting the weight of her words sink in, and frankly, I am appalled. The evidence of a deliberate, calculated, and cruel conspiracy presented by the respondent is overwhelming and deeply disturbing. My breath caught in my throat. Ms. Chapman gave my hand a reassuring squeeze. The judge continued, her voice ringing with authority. I am now ready to deliver my ruling on the petition for competency and guardianship. Furthermore, her eyes narrowed, I will be addressing the significant collateral issues this hearing has brought to light regarding potential perjury, fraud, and conspiracy to commit fraud. The judge's words hung in the air, heavy and final. This court finds no evidence whatsoever to support the petitioner's claims regarding Lillian Jenkins's competency or fitness as a mother. In fact, the evidence overwhelmingly demonstrates Ms. Jenkins to be a victim of a malicious and calculated campaign of gaslighting and manipulation. A wave of relief so profound washed over me that I nearly sagged in my chair. Ms. Chapman's hand was a firm anchor on my arm. Therefore, the judge continued, her gaze sweeping over Aidan and Marin, the petition for a competency hearing and temporary guardianship is dismissed with prejudice. Lillian Jenkins will retain sole legal and physical custody of her daughter, Leah Jenkins. Sole custody. The words were a balm to my raw nerves. Leah was safe. She was mine. Furthermore, the judge's voice hardened, this court is issuing immediate, permanent restraining orders against Aidan Jenkins and Marin Jenkins, prohibiting any contact with Lillian Jenkins or Leah Jenkins, direct or indirect, for a period of no less than 5 years. Marin let out a strangled sob. Aidan simply stared, his face ashen. And now, the judge said, her eyes fixing on the trio of conspirators, we turn to the more serious matters raised by the evidence. The recordings, the fabricated CPS report, the clear collusion with Dr. Fuller. This court cannot ignore what appears to be a blatant attempt to defraud Ms. Jenkins and pervert the course of justice. She picked up a sheaf of papers. I am referring this entire case file, including all submitted evidence and transcripts of testimony to the District Attorney's Office for immediate investigation into potential criminal charges. These may include, but are not limited to, conspiracy to commit fraud, perjury, filing a false police report, and in the case of Dr. Fuller, severe medical malpractice and ethical violations that will also be reported to the State Medical Board. Dr. Fuller visibly slumped, his career flashing before his eyes and turning to ash. Maren looked like she might faint. Aidan finally seemed to grasp the enormity of what was happening. A tremor ran through him. Their confident smirks from the beginning of the hearing were long gone, replaced by the stark terror of impending doom. The judge banged her gavel. Court adjourned. The aftermath was swift and brutal for them. The District Attorney's Office moved quickly. Aidan and Maren were arrested within days, charged with multiple felonies. The news of their scheme and Aidan's gambling debts spread like wildfire through our community. They became pariahs. Aidan, without access to my grandmother's trust, and now facing hefty legal bills and likely prison time, was financially ruined. Vinny, I imagined, would not be pleased. Maren's carefully constructed facade of the grieving, concerned matriarch shattered, revealing the venomous manipulator beneath. Dr. Fuller's license was suspended pending investigation, his reputation irrevocably destroyed. I walked out of that courtroom exhausted, hollowed out, but with Leah's future secure in my hands. The fog of postpartum depression, which had been so cruelly exploited, began to lift, slowly but surely, as the immediate threat receded. I found a therapist, a real one, who helped me process the trauma and the lingering shadows of PPD. Jade was waiting for me outside the courtroom, her face etched with remorse. "Lillian, I am so sorry," she whispered, tears in her eyes. "I should have believed you. I should have been there for you." I just nodded, too drained for anger. "Let's go home, Jade." She became my rock in the weeks that followed, helping with Leah, listening without judgment, her presence a quiet apology that I slowly began to accept. The trust fund, Grandmother Annabelle's legacy of love, was safe. It would provide for Leah, for us, a security that Aidan and Maren had so desperately tried to steal. I didn't forgive them. I don't think I ever will. Their destruction was the direct consequence of their choices, the karmic price for their cruelty and greed. My revenge wasn't a fiery outburst, but the cold, methodical dismantling of their lives with the truth they tried so hard to bury. The scars of their betrayal remain, a permanent reminder etched onto my soul. But they are also a testament to a mother's strength, to the lengths I went to protect my child and reclaim my sanity. My future, once a terrifying, murky unknown, is now clear. It's mine, and Leah's, to build on the ashes of their deceit. And we will build it beautiful,